Welcome back. Welcome back to the Systemish show. Today we're going to be talking about the stories that we create. If you're here for the first time, I want to welcome you. And if you're a return, who's someone who's been watching, please like, share, tag a friend, and comment, right? So we're talking about the stories that we create. What is your story? I think stories are super important, especially as people, especially as business owners, especially as individuals, right? Because a lot of times what happens is the stories that we tell ourselves and the stories that we carry over time, they affect not only our entrepreneurship, our business journey, but they affect our life as well, right? So we're going to talk about the first key area, why storytelling is so powerful, right? I feel like storytelling is so powerful because what we tell ourselves and what do we say to ourselves within those stories, we create a fantasy. We create a life, right? That guess what? A lot of times you fall into that life. And that might not be genuinely who you are humanly. That might not be who you are as an individual. But because you have created this story and you made it so powerful that other people believe it, other people believe the story that you have created, right? And what you want is you want people to know the story of how it really happened, right? So sometimes we have to say to ourselves is that our story, our journey is more powerful than any made up story in the world, right? And I think for so long we were told not to tell our story. But now is the time for you to tell your story, maximize on it, and let people know that my story is my journey. And there are other people that are out there waiting to hear your story. They're waiting to hear your voice. They're waiting for you to be in a place where whatever you're doing is so powerful to the point that guess what? It creates the life that you wanted to create. So you have to build on that story. You have to make sure that the powerful story that you're telling, right, has key areas and aspects that you want people to know. I'm not telling you to share everything because you don't have to share everything. You just share, right, what you really want people to know, what you feel like is going to benefit you, right? Like for me, I do systems and automation. I do all things tech, right? The story that I used to tell, or I still tell people, is how I started my journey. And how I started my journey is people used to ask me, how do you balance being an entrepreneur and balance being a mom? And the same things that I tell them, I still tell them to this day. I had to create systems and automations in my life to be mom and to be a business owner. It's that simple, right? Every story is relevant to what you do. So if you're a lawyer, if you're a coach, a consultant, your journey started from somewhere, right? It may not have been perfect because it hasn't, right? But the things that you used to do are different from what you do now. And you got to understand the people that you serve or want to serve, they're there. They're asking those hard questions, right? Why is storytelling so powerful? Why do I need to tell my story? And you need to tell your story because others are waiting for your story. There's so many people that are out there that are waiting for you. They're waiting for you to be that voice. They're waiting for you to be that person that says, I understand. I get it. I'm here for you, right? It's that sisterhood. It's that unity that they're looking for. So never be afraid of your story. So if you're listening, you're tuning in, right? Drop my story starts from today. My story starts from today. Start telling your story, start telling your journey from today. Because your story is going to help someone else. Your story is going to help someone else's journey. But guess what? It's going to also allow you to level up and be better within what you're doing. Not only what you're doing, and the places that you want to go. And not only the places you want to go, it's going to allow you to be the individual you were destined to be, right? And I know sometimes people say, my story might not matter, but everybody's story matter, right? Because when you start to share key parts of your life, your journey, know somebody out there is thanking you. Somebody out there is saying, finally, right? My calls have been answered because somebody gets me, someone understands me, right? So, what we're going to do is we're going to take a break and we're going to come back and finish talking about stories. I want to say welcome back, welcome back. If you're just tuning in, we were talking about why stories are so powerful, right? Now we're going to talk about how do you find and identify your story, right? And we always wonder like how and why should we be identifying this, right? And it's simple. The way that you identify your story and identify your story is look at your life, look at the lessons, look at the things that you went through, the things that transpired over time, right? And identify how that has helped you to get to where you are today and share those stories, the good, the bad, the ugly, share it all. Why? Because that lets people know that one, you're human, and it also lets people know that you've gone through some things to get to where you are. And that's what you want, right? You want people to understand you're human. You want people to understand that, listen, no matter what I did or where I went or how I got there, right? I'm reformed. Or even if you're not reformed, it's the fact that your story has led you to a better place, right? And then you're so relatable to other people that are in your shoes right now, or either in your shoes where you started from. And that's the key thing, right? But you also can identify, right, your story, your own story, about the lessons that you were taught, right? What were you taught over your life that you carried on with you now? Not only did you carry on, but you implemented it in your life. Share those stories. Don't make it so hard. The stories are in you. It's how you get it out, right? And the way that you get it out is you just be transparent and you be real, you be authentic, and you let people know, like, yeah, I started from the bottom, right? If you started from the bottom and now I'm here, right? Or you could say, listen, my life wasn't that rough. I had it good, but it started to turn when I hit this point, that point, and that point, and just tell your story because somebody wants to hear it. And then the way you can identify it is if it bothers you or if it hurts you or if you feel some sort of way and have an emotion about it, right? Share it. That's a story that needs to be shared because now you're identifying whether it's that pain, whether it's that happiness, whether it's that sadness, or whether it's that joy, whatever it is, you're identifying that story. Every story comes with an emotion, right? And it does. And whether it's a good emotion or a bad emotion, what it does is it allows you, right, to not only help others, but guess what it also does? And it frees you from the bondage that you were in. But not only frees you from the bondage that you were in, guess what it also does? It allows you to let people know that I understand. I understand what you went through. I understand what you're going through, right? And I've been where you've been. But guess what? Together, we can go to higher heights. Together, we can fix this, right? Because if you try to do it alone, you might go through some things alone. A lot of people do it. You go through something alone, you don't want to tell nobody, you think it's solved, you think it's fixed. And then that same feeling, that same story keeps repeating itself. Instead of you saying, let me get some help or let me reach out to somebody who, guess what, in essence, can help me get through what I'm feeling. right? And that's what you want, whether it's in business or whether it's in your personal life. You don't have to stick with your story alone. So when you tell people your story, you share people your story, it eases that feeling because now you're getting it out. But not only are you getting it out, guess what? You're letting it be known that what you're doing is your, guess what? One, you're letting people know that I have a story. I'm here to tell it. And then what you're also doing is you're also saying to people, guess what? I created another story in my head that is how my life is going to be. And that's how I'm going to maneuver my life. Not the story that I was telling myself in the past, yesterday, the day before. Because remember, the stories that we create are the stories that we live by. Now, when you create a negative story, you live a negative life. When you create a positive story, you create a positive life. So don't let anyone tell you that the stories that you create are not affecting your life because they are. Some people might even not be real enough or in a place to tell you because they're going through that same thing. So you should ask yourself every day, what is my story? What am I telling myself, right? Or what have people told me about me? Identify it. And not only identify it, grow with it, scale, move through it. But take that story and guess what you do with that story? You bottle it up, right? And you figure out a way where you can tell it that reaches the masses, reaches other people. So that's how you identify it, and that's how you find your story, right? And it's amazing because I know people tell you you shouldn't tell stories, but it's okay to tell stories when it's your story, right? Because sometimes you tell people stories and it's not your story. So I understand sometimes you want to tell someone else's story, but you can never tell their story how they can tell their story. So tell your story and tell it the way you lived it and the way you went through it because stories are relatable. Your story is relatable to someone else's. Your story lets people know that she's been through some things or he's been through some things, but she's managed to conquer it. She's managed to get through it, right? But also, what also she did was she prospered from it, right? She didn't repeat it because that's what you want. You don't want to repeat a negative story. But if you keep repeating a negative story, that's because you keep creating that same story in your head. It's time for you to build and make a new story and live the story how you want it to be told, right? How not only how you want it to be told, how you want other people to know, right? About it. It comes from within you. It starts from within you. And that's what matters the most. It's your story, your journey, and just the fact that it's so powerful. And nobody can tell you or make you shift or pivot your story but you. So every day you go to sleep, every day you wake up, tell yourself, what story am I telling myself? What story do I want people to remember me by? What story do I want to be known every day of my life? So what we're going to do is we're going to take another break and we're going to come back and talk more about the stories we create. Welcome back, welcome back. We've been talking about the stories we create. We've been talking about why storytelling is so powerful, but we've also been talking about how you can find and identify your story, right? Now, the most important part is why do you tell your story, right? And we tell our stories because we want other people to know that they're not alone. But not only do we tell our stories because we want other people to know that they're not alone, we tell our stories because sometimes when we're going through pain or anger or hurt, right? We want people to know that we have feelings, right? We want people to know that guess what? What we have identified has allowed us to be successful in our business, has allowed us to let go of the story that we have created. But not only that, the question you have to ask yourself is why do you tell your story, right? If you do tell your story. Because the fact remains is when you tell your story, tell it from how it started, right? And we tell our story because we want others to really know who we are, right? When you tell your story, people connect to that. When they have that connection with you, that's more than anything. Because what becomes happens is you have a network of people, whether it's a sisterhood, a brotherhood, whatever it is. You have a network of people who, guess what, are committed to your story. They're committed to your dream, your mission, your vision. Why? Because they can connect to your story. So you have to tell your story because other people need to connect to that. Especially when you're building a business that's based on connections, right? Not only connection, it's based on the fact that you started from somewhere. You have to let people know where you started from. So why do you tell your story? Because it's the foundation of where you really started your story, right? And sometimes people don't understand that you got to start from the basics, the foundation. Because people are going to look at you like, okay, how did she get there? What does she have to go against? Or what does she have to go through to get to where she is? And sometimes, even when we're sitting on the other side of the screen or wherever you are in the world, you might be going through something right now, right? And on the outside, you look fine. On the inside, you are a mess. Why? Because you have created a story in your mind and in your head and in your heart that you can't do it or it's too hard, right? Instead of you saying, okay, this is going on right now, but I'm not gonna let it get to me. I'm gonna deal with it for right now, have this little pity party, and I'm gonna move on, right? Because when you start to tell your story and share your story, what happens is your body starts to change, right? Your body starts to send signals to you that are of joy, peace, happiness, right? But also, you know what it does? It allows people to understand that whatever you did or whatever story you were telling, right, whether you had a negative effect or a positive effect, what it does is it lets them know that you can get through anything. And that's what you want, for people to know that you can get through anything. So you tell your story because you want people to know, like, listen, where I come from does not define who I am, but also what I've been through does not define who I am. And that's the reality of it. Your story creates where you're going because people are going to want to know how you started from maybe nothing or from the beginning to whether it's making 4, 5, 6 figures or guess what, or making little to none of that right now. But guess what? Whether you made no money in your business or whether you made $500 or whether you made $7,000, it does not matter. Guess what? Because you still have a story behind what you have made, right? To get to that next level. Everybody starts from zero. Nobody starts from, you know, 5,000, 10,000, 25,000, a million, 3.1 million, whatever it is for you. Everyone starts from the zero mark. Because whenever you invest in something new, you build something new, guess what you do? Now you have to trial and error it, or what you have to really do is you have to create the foundation. You have to put in the foundational work. You have to build the blocks. And I feel like that's what a lot of people don't understand is that when we create a story, our story starts from zero, right? Because when we're born, we don't know what our story is, right? We learn along the way. So whether that's you have to crawl before you walk, or whether that's, your first words, right? It's what somebody has told you about your story. And then the older you get, you start to put the pieces of the puzzle together of what your true story is, but also your identity of who you created. And I think that's the most important thing. And honestly, it's that you have to be vigilant and be aware and know that you're telling your story because that's who you are. But not only that, you want to inspire other people with your story, right? Because a lot of people are put on this earth to inspire, to help others. And by sharing your story, you're inspiring others, you're helping others, but not only what you're doing is you're creating a safe space for them to know that it's okay for them to share their story, no matter what their journey is. You know, there's some people who are afraid to tell their story because of where they started or where they are. You know, whether that they could be going through some sort of addiction, or they could be going through homelessness, eviction, or they could be going through, they've been incarcerated before and they had to start all over. Whatever it is, whatever your story is what makes you. Your story is what's going to help you build a profitable business. But not only a profitable business, it's going to help you build a profitable life because you're going to look back on your stories and that's going to take you to your next level. And that's what you want, right? And you don't never want to say to yourself, my story does not count, because your story does count. Now, will you make it count is what you should be asking yourself, right? Because you tell your story because you know in your mind that, yeah, people want to hear it, but not only people want to hear it, you want people to know that guess what? You've been through some things. It has not always been this easy. Because some people look at you and they're like, oh, her life was easy. Oh, she had it easy. But they don't really know what you really went through to get to where you are. You know, sometimes we sit and we look at people who are making 6, 7, 8 figures, not understanding the grind they had to put in, the hustle they had to put in, the work that they had to put in to get there, right? And sometimes they're not going to tell you that, right? But I'm here to tell you, it doesn't matter what level you on, somebody has a story to tell. And yes, there are some good stories, and yes, there are some bad stories, but you got to keep telling your story over and over till you continue to help the people that you need to help, literally. So what we're going to do is we're going to take another break, and then we're going to come back, and we're going to talk about stories we create. Welcome back. Welcome back. We've been talking about the stories that we create, right? We've been talking about why stories are so powerful. We've been talking about how do you identify and find your story. We've also been talking about why do we tell our stories. Now we're going to talk about what do stories teach us, right? The stories teach us, right? What they do is they teach us to be ourselves, but they also teach us, right, to just be authentic to what we're doing. But what I also want to say is that what do stories teach us? They just teach us that we're not alone. They just teach us that the world needs us. But they also teach us that guess what? No matter what we're going through, we need to share. We need to put it out there. But guess what? It also tells us that the stories that we created in our mind, right, have also said, right, for us, let us ease the pressure, right? Let us get it off our chest, right? But the stories that they should also teach you that you have something to say, Not only do you have something to say, you have things that you need to get off your chest, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, right? The story should teach you that guess what? You are somebody. You have something valid to tell people and say to people, right? But what also it teaches us is that somebody is waiting for a lesson from you, right? But when are you going to teach that lesson? When are you going to speak up? And when are you going to say, guess what? I'm here, me and my story. I'm here, and everything around me, right, makes it useful for you, right? But what stories also teach us is that the world is not black and white, right? It's not. The world does have color because there's so many arrays and there's so many variations of stories, right? So many variations. And the fact remains is that the fact that there's so many variations of stories should tell you that what you tell somebody, they tell somebody, and they tell someone else, right? And guess what it does, right? Guess what it does? It creates a domino effect. It creates a domino effect. But I don't never want you to feel like, right, the storytelling, right, has to end. But what I do want to say to you is that tell your story, teach your story, because guess what? You could turn your story, right? You could take your story, you could develop it, right, into something amazing. You could turn it into a movement. You could turn it into whether it's a product, whether it's a service, whatever you want to turn your story into. But you got to remember what we tell ourselves, how we develop what we develop is based on what we go through in life. What you go through today is not what you went through yesterday, and it's not what you're going to go through tomorrow. Those are stories. Remember that, right? Remember when I told you your stories are good, your stories are bad, your stories could be ugly. It doesn't even matter. It's a story, right? And people need to know that not everything is peaches and cream, not everything is roses. But that doesn't mean that you don't have something to give to the world, because you do have something to give to the world, right? And it's your story. So when you teach your story, right, you teach it from the aspect of whether it's pain, whether it's hurt, whether it's emotion. You teach it from, yes, I was in pain. I started here. I went here. I got here, right? Let them know how you move from point A to point B to point C to point D. Guess what? Because what that's going to do is that's going to let people know, like, okay, I have to start here. I have to go here, and I have to move here in my time, right? Because sometimes people feel like, oh, well, I got to move on someone else's time. No, you're not moving on somebody else's time. You're moving on your time. Your journey is on, and your race depends on you. You don't have to move as fast as somebody else, because what somebody else is doing may not be cohesive to what you're doing. And let's be real about that, right? So remember that the stories teach us that we can build a solid foundation on where we started. And it also teaches us that no matter where we start from and no matter where we finish, that we are somebody. We have a voice, and we're going to get to that next level, right? So I'm here to tell you that it doesn't matter where you start, where you end. Your story is being created within you. Now it's your time to share that story. It's your time to excel, make it easy, and let the world know what you do, who you serve, why you serve them. And if you don't have a business, that's okay. But take your story and let people know that I'm here. Let them know. It's okay. And you can teach them what you went through, how you got out of it, right? Do it like that, but you're still telling your story. So I felt like today I wanted to talk to you guys about, the stories that we tell ourselves, because a lot of times people are afraid to share their story. Never be afraid to share your story. Your story is what creates you. Your story is what makes you. And guess what? Today's the day that you tell your story. Tell it from that pain, that joy. Tell it from where you wanted to start and where you wanted to end. Just tell the world about it, right? So not only did we go through why you tell your story, right? Why your story is so powerful, right? How you identified it, right? And how you find your story, but we also went through, right? Why you tell your story, and we also shared why do you teach your story, right? And why do you teach others? So I'm here to tell you today, right? It starts now. Share your story, right? I started to share my story and look at me. It made me be the person I am today, the business owner I am today, with no shame, no guilt. Never be guilty of your story. Never feel ashamed of your story. Your story is what's going to make you. So, if, like I said, if you guys are tuning in, right, please tag someone, share, comment, like, say, I'm ready to share my story with the world. It's here today. Today is my day to share my story. So I want to say, you guys, thank you for tuning in, right? Please come back next week at the same time, same channel, right? And please share the video in the meantime with other people who need to share their story. So thank you guys for tuning in. And today is your day to start your story and share your story. See you next week.